Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's another episode of Let's Talk Broncos. I'm sitting here with my co-host Zach Seegers. Bree again was fired from the podcast. We'll see what happens when she reapplies yet again. I mean, this is a constant thing here. She did firing her left and right. That's what we do. But Zach, how are you doing today, my man?
Man, doing great, doing great. It does suck that Bree's not around. Hope she survives the boonies. She's going out where you can hear the banjos. So best of luck to her. Hopefully she can make it back. And yeah, fresh day on the calendar. I haven't referenced the calendar that often, but I try and flip it every month. Normally I forget until like a week or so into the month. But here we go, July 1st, fresh day. We've got Steve Sewell up there, running by some Buffalo Bills. So feeling good. Let's go Broncos.
Let's go Broncos. And yeah, I mean, it's a fun episode. We're going to continue our position breakdowns. Today we're going to do wide receiver. I think it's a really interesting position for the Broncos. Just because of the amount of players that could make the team. I think there's a lot of diversity here in this room, and I think there's a lot of outcomes that could happen in this room. But we're going to be grading it afterwards as well, what the room looks like. First, Zach, I want to get your opinion. Just what do you make of this room, not knowing who's going to make the final 53-man roster, but what do you just make of it going into camp? Do you like the bodies they have in this room?
Yeah, I like the general depth of it. I think as you go deeper on the depth chart, it probably looks a little better. Like I think their wide receiver 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 probably stacks up pretty well with where other teams are in the league. I think it's more the star power. Like where is Cortland Sutton among like the wide receiver ones in the league? Where is like Marvin Mims? Is he kind of just this deep threat guy, one trick pony? Or to what you've been saying, and I believe it as well, I might not be buying as much stock as you, but can he break out and be maybe even the best receiver on this team, but at least a legit number 2 option? I think we know how Josh Reynolds is going to fit into it. But is it, is that your second best receiver or your third best guy? So yeah, I just think that's what it comes down to me. I feel good about how the room is filled out. I just wonder if you have like the special players that frankly, I think you need now in the NFL. There's a reason they're going for damn near $40 million a year.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think they are missing that number 1 wide receiver. Just looking at the list, like I think as much as I love Marvin Mims, is he going to be a true game-breaking number 1 wide receiver this next year for the Broncos going into a sophomore year? I think that's a lot to ask for. I think you have some very high expectations for Marvin Mims. Is that if that's what you think? And then Cortland Sutton, we kind of know what he is. I think he's a good wide receiver 2 if you have an elite number 1, right? I think that's what he is. So that's what you're missing. I like the depth throughout. I really do, Zach. I really do. But let's just start at Cortland Sutton. Let's start there. What are expectations for him this next year? Do you think that him not getting an extension this next year affects his play at all? What do you think?
I don't know if it'll affect his play at all, because I think he's going to want to go out and prove, I deserve to be one of these $30 million guys. If he hits the open market, I agree he's probably more of a high-end number 2, low-end number 1 number or receiver, that is. But if you look at the number where those guys are coming in at, like Michael Pittman, I think is maybe obviously a much younger version, but he signed for around $25 million this year. So I think Sutton's probably, and receiver or NFL players in general tend to be confident people, believe pretty highly in themselves. He probably thinks he's worth 30 million a year, at least 25 million a year. I think. I think he's going to have to prove that some. Has only won 1,000-yard receiving season in his career. There's certainly some reasons for that. But I think the question I'm curious about is like, can he thrive with this style of quarterback? You look at his best seasons, it's 2019, which is Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, who's kind of bombs away, and then Drew Lock emerges down the stretch. Then obviously you have the ACL soon after that. isn't really the same in 2021. I think showed some signs of coming back in 2022 and then was more himself in 2023. 2019, 2022, 2023, the three best seasons of his career all come with quarterbacks that kind of want to launch the ball downfield. And like, see what happens. Which I think plays very well to Courtland Sutton's style. He's going to win those jump balls. And so these quarterbacks that are willing to throw a lot of those tend to help him have his most productive seasons. On the flip side, when he played with Case Keenum or Teddy Bridgewater, I think he wasn't as effective. And I'd say at least stylistically, Bo Nix projects to be more like those two. So I'm curious, just is he as productive as he was last year? Because again, he's been productive in terms of like explosive plays or touchdowns last year. He was near the top of the league in touchdowns and just red zone production in general. But I don't think he's like the down to down chain mover or like that productive of a guy. And I think that's what you want with this quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if like Josh Reynolds produces him as I'm talking about. I'd be a little surprised, but I think it's within the realm of possibility. What do you think, Joey? Am I doom casting here, or do you think it's reasonable?
Okay. One, I'm not fully buying into the idea of this is all that Nix is he's taking lesser yardage wide receivers, even when there's people open down the field. I just don't buy that, because I've seen Bo Nix play at another school and he was the exact opposite. But the moment he goes to the school that's known for being conservative and runs nothing but shallow crossers and stuff like that, all of a sudden he's a different guy. I don't know. Maybe we just connect the dots there a little bit and we decide that it's Oregon's offense that does this to every single quarterback. Who remembers Herbert? Like this is just what Oregon does at the end of the day. So I'm not fully convinced that it is a Bo Nix thing about how, hey, this next year there's just not going to be a lot of deep balls being thrown around. I don't think
Russell
that
Wilson, Drew Lock level. I don't think this offense is going to be like Russell Wilson, where I think they were like top 5 in the league in terms of percentage of passes that were going 20 plus yards downfield. I'd agree that Oregon might have definitely been deflating Bo Nix's aggression and pointing to Auburn. I think is good evidence of that. But I mean, Russell Wilson is known for just living on the deep ball.
Yes. Now, I think that hurts his numbers. Only throwing the deep ball hurts Courtland Sutton's numbers, in my opinion. That if Bo Nix can throw to all 3 levels of the field, intermediate, outside, do all of that, Courtland Sutton should be a better wide receiver this next year. That Joe Flacco game, who remembers the one against the Raiders where Courtland Sutton caught it felt like 4 posts, intermediate posts across the middle of the field, which is what ended up getting him his 100 yards that year. I think there's more to Courtland Sutton's game than just straight down the sideline. I think he's just a pretty good wide receiver altogether. I don't think Bo Nix, if he does have a good year, it shouldn't hurt his numbers, in my opinion. I don't think so.
I think that's a great point. I do want to test you on this take, though, really quick, and do a quick little over or under with you. Okay, over under 60 receptions.
I'm not good at stats. Can I pull up the stats real quick? 1 second, everybody.
I can tell you I have them right here handy.
Over under 60 receptions. I will go.
He's had 42, 72. Then the year he missed with injury, 58, 64, 59.
Over under 60. I will go over.
All right. I'll go 7. I'll say 700. I'll get 800 yards. 800 yards.
800 yards. Man, you're like Vegas. That's exactly probably where I put him.
Well, I'm just saying, if these are kind of where he's been around post injury. So if we're saying Bo Nix may be hitting all 3 levels of the field helps him, you think maybe he'd be getting over this?
Well, my whole point was if Bo Nix plays good. I'm not all the way there that he just is an amazing quarterback in year 1. but I would say right there, like 800 yards. Honestly, that's probably where I would have Cortland Sutton.
All right. And then 10 touchdowns. Or not even 10. I'll say
Under
6, 5, 5.
5
That's about right.
touchdowns.
That's what he's averaged over these last 3 seasons. And then last year he had 10.
I'll go over 5. Over 5 touchdowns.
All right. Yeah, I think that's all pretty reasonable. I think it's probably around there. I like your theory about Bo Nix. I don't know if Cortland Sutton will outproduce what he did last year. I think last year might be the peak, at least until he ends up in a different situation.
Well, we have a question in the chat real quick, and it's from Peyton James. Do we bring back Court, or do we think we bring Court back? So this season, yes, they are. I don't think they're going to trade him. The year after this, I don't think they re-sign him. That's my opinion. Zach, what do you make of those two options? And then I'll finish the rest of the question.
Yeah, starting there, I think Court's definitely, like, there is, I think, an outside chance at some sort of trade. Whether that be the second part of this question or not. But I think it's pretty unlikely to happen before the trade deadline. I wouldn't be that surprised if at the trade deadline, maybe this Broncos season goes kind of the worst way it could go, and they're 1-2-8. I forget if it's 10 weeks in or however long in it is. But if they're like 2-8 at the trade deadline, 2-7, I wouldn't be surprised at all if at that point you're trading Cortland Sutton, because to Joey's point, I think they are planning on letting him walk, this coming off season or next spring. So yeah, if you're already out of it and out of it by a ways, you might go, okay, what 10 games of this guy for Bo Nix's development or a 3rd round pick? We'll take the 3rd round pick.
So I imagine that rules out the second part where it's any chance we trade him plus a pick for an elite wide receiver is such as Ayuk or CD. If they're waiting for the deadline, I don't think they're going to be able to get Ayuk. At least I think he's going to be traded or not traded before. I don't know. I don't think that you're going to be able to get him at the trade deadline though.
I fully agree. That would be more the training camp trade, which I think is less likely. I think there's a small chance they find some sort of trade before the season. Again, I would strongly bet against it. I think this would be the most likely way for it to happen. The Ayuk San Francisco situation definitely seems hairy. I wouldn't be surprised if a trade ends up happening there, or if they end up parting ways. I don't think it'll happen before the season at this point. CD, I think, is going to probably just be on the Cowboys and then either hit free agency or be re-signed as a Dallas Cowboy next spring. But Brandon Ayuk, I think, definitely could be attained. If the going rate about Ayuk that's reported out there is true, which was they were happy to go for a 1st and maybe even a high 2nd. If I'm the Broncos, I'd offer a 2nd in Cortland Sutton and not think twice about it. I think Sutton could fit some of that Shanahan stuff. He's not like a rack guy by any means. But he can do some of that blocking stuff in the run game that I think appeals to those guys. And it could just be a solid X in their room, bring some size and physicality to it. Be a veteran option that you can still compete at a high level with. You're not like immediately having to rely on Ricky Pearsall while you're in the Super Bowl window. Excuse me. This is, I believe, the 2nd to last cheap year of Brock Purdy they have. So you want to make do of these years because it gets really tough. And this is also going to be the last cheap year at wide receiver they might have if they keep him. All these guys are about to get more expensive. Trent Williams is going to be out the door soon. So you want to maximize this thing. If you are forced to, which is why I don't think they'll trade Ayuk, but if they're forced to, if the relationship gets that messy, I think you'd want to bring in a veteran like Cortland Sutton where you can keep rolling. Maybe the Broncos could even do like a 3rd in Sutton. I doubt it, but like a 2nd in Sutton, sign me up. Ayuk matches this team's timeline, and I think he's a top 10 receiver in the league right now and has continuously improved. He's got every skill you want. He's a good route runner. He's explosive after the catch. He's explosive at the catch point and before the catch. He can win vertically. He can win underneath. He can, be used on like smoke screens and plays where you're just asking your receiver to create out of thin air. He's like a really, really good all-around receiver. It took him a while to develop, but God, I love Brandon Ayuk. I might even go with first in Cortland Sutton for him. I think so highly of him. If the Broncos weren't going to probably be picking top 10 next year.
Yes, that is one thing about that. You don't know where the Broncos will be picking next year. Let's move off of Cortland Sutton, though. We spent plenty of time speaking about him. I want to ask you about the depth here, specifically Josh Reynolds and Marvin Mims. Not really depth, both also starters. Who do you think has, and I know you're a little iffy on on Marvin Mims. You kind of go back and forth. So who do you think, Zach, has more yards this next year? Throw your questions back at you, Josh Reynolds or Marvin Mims.
I like it. I'm taking Reynolds pretty quickly.
What?
I think Mims will break out, but I don't know how. I still think it's going to be a high variant style of play, kind of like what we saw Sutton last year, where it's a lot of explosives. I don't know how down to down it's going to be. I think Josh Reynolds, who is coming from this Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson offense, is rooted in Sean Payton's New Orleans Saints offense. That's where that's the staff Dan Campbell came off of. And that's the concepts that Ben Johnson is running here. So I think you take Josh Reynolds, this guy who's pretty familiar with the scheme, and was just like a good, reliable, steady receiver in the scheme. I'm a little, I think Bo Nix is going to be a little more conservative than you are. I think Josh Reynolds matches that a lot better than either Sutton or Mims. I think Reynolds is going to be a huge beneficiary of that. I think he might have the most fantasy points or PPR fantasy points of any receiver in this room this year. That wouldn't surprise me. So I'm going, and I'll also say this: it wouldn't surprise me if Mims beat him out. I think the breakout that you foresee is well within the realm of possibility. The talent's there. I'm going to bet on the more proven option right now. But yeah, that would be my answer.
I disagree here. As long as Marvin Mims stays healthy, he's on track to be more competing with Cortland Sutton, I think, for yards on this team than he is Josh Reynolds. I think Josh Reynolds is a reliable wide receiver, and you said it, Zach. But that's exactly what he is. This is a guy that just came off of damn near a career year for him. Now 600 yards. I don't think Marvin Mims has a lot more in between there. I don't see him being that much lower than that, but I can see him exceeding that pretty highly. And while Josh Reynolds has been in the league for a long time, I don't think this Bo Nix Broncos offense is the year where he breaks his career high in yards. I don't think so.
My counter to that would be, he had his career year just last year, so he's still, I don't know, at the relative height of his powers, whatnot. And last year, where's the Amon-Ra St. Brown in the Broncos pass catching group, including tight ends? Where's the Amon-Ra St. Brown? Where's the Sam Laporta in this group? Amon-Ra maybe isn't thought that highly of. I think draft pedigrees.
No, I like him. I love
Amon-Ra last year. You know what I mean? So I do think that's part of it too. Now their whole passing game was extremely productive. There was plenty to go around, but I do think he's not going to have the same competition for targets that he had in Detroit. I think he'll go over that 600 number this year. I honestly do.
So this is a give and take because, if this was a 1 year deal, I would agree with you. But this is a guy, I'm saying, has been in the league since 2017, Zach Seegers. I think you can only make that excuse once. What about all the other years he was in the league? This man has been in the league for quite a bit, and he's never cracked 618 yards ever in his career. I think Marvin Mims comes in, and I think it's definitely.
What's your rough projected stat line? Receptions, yards, touchdowns.
On Reynolds or Mims?
Mims.
Okay, so I think less I'm going to just do it over under, and I'll tell you, I think, by how much more. I think he's going to have less receptions than Josh Reynolds, or right around the same. I think he might have 200 more yards than a Josh Reynolds would. If he has 600, I think Marvin Mims could have an 800-yard year pretty easily. And then I don't know about touchdowns. I really don't know. That's always a toss-up. I'm not even going to make a prediction on touchdowns. But I think Marvin Mims, where I'm getting this all screwed up, I think, for other people is, man, I see his game translating to being a better route runner fairly easy, because where everyone likes to point out what a good deep threat is, or they're really talking about guys that aren't proven as deep threats, whereas Marvin Mims came in the league immediately and showed that he is a damn good deep threat. That's going to open up the rest of his game. Like, there's not many guys like that. There's a lot of people where it's like, yeah, he's a deep threat. Yeah, how many deep balls has he actually caught, though? That's always the thing. Everyone likes just putting a 40 time next to a wide receiver and being like, well, he's a good deep threat. No, he's not. How many has he caught? Marvin Mims actually proved to us that he is. DBs are going to have to respect that, and that's going to open up the rest of his game. It's like DK Metcalf came in the league. He's not a good route runner. He still isn't a good route runner. He's still not agile. Nothing about him, but he's so good at that deep ball, it opens up the rest of his game. I could see something happening like that for Marvin Mims. He has an easier path making it and getting open than a lot of wide receivers in the NFL. His path to becoming good, because of his ability to win deep, and has proven to be able to win deep, is going to make his game easier to adjust to, and for him going into year two. I'm really sold on him, especially when I saw Troy Franklin, who I think is a much worse route runner than Marvin Mims, went underneath with Bo Nix so much. So much. So, yeah.
So I'm curious, what would you say, like we were just talking about with Courtland Sutton, is he a wide receiver 1 or more of like a high-end wide receiver 2 on most teams in the league? Obviously on the Broncos, he's the 1. But where would you project Marvin Mims ends up? Not even 2024, but project what, like your projection for kind of the type of player he develops into, the high end projection, where you think he is, and then the low end projection.
I think the low end is that he doesn't improve in the areas where he has an easier path to, and he's in the NFL for quite a while just being a deep threat. I think the more realistic option, though, is that he expands his game a little bit and is a wide receiver 2 in this league. I don't think it takes much for him to become that. It's not like he has hands issues. He just needs to be able to sell his routes a little better. That's all.
I like it. I'm trying to pull up Mike Wallace stats. It'd be cool if he could be Mike Wallace.
He's so much more agile. You're pointing out these dudes that only run fast in a straight line. This is not Marvin Mims.
All right. If Marvin Mims had a year like Mike Wallace, prime Mike Wallace, it'd be pretty. Even through year 30, he's getting 1,000-yard seasons. Mike Wallace is.
No, Mike Wallace is a damn good wide receiver. He's just more Troy Franklin than he is Marvin Mims. It's just the archetype of player is different.
What do you think about the Mims Eddie Royal comp? That's what
Eddie Royal was more, I thought, quick than he was straight line speed like Marvin Mims is. I think Royal, I like the comp though, is just like a punt returner and utilization. Like I like it, but I don't know. He is more straight line speed than he is fast, but he has plenty of, or straight line speed than he is agile, but he also has plenty of agility. Mike Wallace was literally run straight. That was his game.
I'm curious, what would be like your Marvin Mims comp?
I think the highest end version of a Marvin Mims comp, and I'm not saying this is who he is, so don't clip this and be like, this is who I think Joey thinks he is. But I think the absolute GOAT level of a Marvin Mims looks like a Brandon Cooks, kind of.
All right. Yeah, I could see that. I don't even know if that's that crazy high end for him.
Cooks had multiple 1,000-yard years, different quarterbacks, different teams. Damn good player.
I guess, I mean, like, I don't think that's that unattainable for him.
Man, I feel like turns out to be that. Shout out.
Yeah. But like Cooks, I don't think was ever like, number one guy. You're right. Like, he had a good number of 1,000-yard seasons, but he's bounced around to 6 different teams. I'd say, there's somewhat of a reason to that.
No, look at the trade packages he got back. That's what you got to look at.
Oh, well, yeah, you're right. You're right. He was
He's traded for a
England
first
gave up
round pick twice.
Rams first rounder. Houston, I don't think gave up that much for it, but nonetheless, yeah, Brandon Cooks. And don't get me wrong, I think that would be a very good outcome for him. But I could, yeah, I don't think that's that unobtainable for him. I like it. All right, that's all.
Cool. All right, so let's move into the depth now. I want to talk Tim Patrick. Missed 2 seasons in a row. I thought he was the best wide receiver on the Broncos before he got hurt. That was my hot take at the time. Should expectations for Broncos country be on him? Could you see him have a huge season?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if he is like a good role player, like maybe for red zone packages, gets the more size out there. You could go with like a jumbo look with Josh Reynolds, Tim Patrick, and Cortland Sutton, maybe on like early downs to get some extra run blocking on the boundaries. I think he can be a plus role player maybe at this point in his career, but I just you tear your Achilles and your ACL in consecutive seasons. It's so hard for me to imagine like you being the same guy in terms of like explosiveness or ability. I do think like his athletic explosiveness was a pretty big part of his game. This is also a guy that's 30 years old now, on top of the injuries that he's rehabbing. He'll turn 31 in the middle of the season. The history for healthy receivers that are 31, 32 and up is pretty bad. So it's tough for me to have that much confidence in him here. I think he makes the roster. I think he contributes a bit, but I don't know. Like, if he ends up being like the 5th or 6th most utilized pass catcher on this team, I think that's honestly, if we're counting running backs and tight ends, 6th I think is probably a very positive outcome for him.
This is interesting. I think there's a higher ceiling than you're alluding to, because I don't think it would be the first time we've seen a player come back from injuries and do well. I think it's I think that it does put it very much in the question. And then even I would say that probably not, but I do think there's that possibility. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, really quick. It's possible, but if we're doing like our end of the year award show in January or February, and we're in the reality where Tim Patrick like came back and looked like same old Tim Patrick, and we were to do award for best story of the season, that's at least nominated, if not winning. So like it is well within the realm of possibility, but it would be like, wow, what a story that he came back from that, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I definitely, I would agree there. But I'm not ruling out that he's better than Troy Franklin just with his experience in the NFL year one. I'm definitely not ruling out that actually. I think that I think that's a probability that he is better than Troy Franklin is in year one. Devon Villay, I think there's a strong chance he's better than Devon Villay as this year goes on. And then just as I go down this, like Brandon Johnson, like, yeah.
I think I'd take Brandon Johnson. Like if I had to bet now the financials, I think give Tim Patrick a better chance, but no money involved. Like who do I think is probably the better receiver? Who do I think like looks better in the preseason? I might bet on Brandon Johnson. I think I would bet on Brandon Johnson.
Fair enough. I'm in a little higher on it than you. I think he makes the roster. I'm not ruling out that he doesn't either. I think the ceiling and floor are very high for this player, and maybe not the ceiling very high, but it's higher than you. And I think the floor is very low. I mean, I would put it out there that there's a chance Tim Patrick doesn't make the team if he doesn't come back and look good. I just think that ceiling might be a little higher. That's all. That's all I got. Just because,
Oh,
like,
really
what is
quick.
the ceiling of Devon Valet versus the floor of Devon Valet? Or what's the ceiling of Troy Franklin versus the floor of Troy Franklin?
And
Like,
beyond
I
that,
think there's
how
a good chance
likely,
that he's better than those two players this year.
and beyond that, like how likely are the ceilings and floors?
Yeah.
You know, like we can talk about how maybe unlikely the ceiling is for Patrick to attain because of the devastating injuries he's coming off of. A 7th round, 26-year-old rookie wide receiver. Odds are he's not going to do much. Like that's just,
All right.
every historical indicator would tell you that he probably doesn't make the roster and almost definitely isn't like a plus player.
Okay.
So I just, even if the floor and ceilings are similar, I think the odds of them hitting those two ends are similar too. I will say really quick, just before we close out here, I do think them cutting him, while it would be painful because they'd have to eat $6 million in dead money, it is very well within the realm of possibility, because even eating that much dead money, they would still save $1 million against the cap by cutting Tim Patrick. So they're not like going in the red at all by cutting Tim Patrick. And I think, if it just looks like he's done post Achilles, post ACL, I think you're probably more intrigued to give that spot to a Brandon Johnson or a Jordan Humphrey or a Devon Valet, someone that maybe has, like, even if we think those guys untapped potential is like a longer shot, if you can talk yourself into that more than Tim Patrick, and Tim Patrick just looks totally washed, I think you save that $1 million and go elsewhere.
So before I sign out here, I have 2 questions for you, Zach. One, how many wide receivers usually make the team? It's like 6. I think last
6.
year was only 4, but yeah, 6.
Yeah, but that was
Yeah.
weird. You had some IR players, and it was also really talent poor, which is also kind of true this year. But yeah, 6 generally.
Pick your
5,
6. Pick your 6. I want to know your 6. Pick them.
All right. Sutton lock, Reynolds lock, Mims lock, Franklin lock. Then it gets tough. I think there's 2 spots
So that's
up
4.
for grabs. Yeah. Shoot. I think Patrick, not quite
5.
a lock, but pretty close. Brandon Johnson. I think Talent's going to win out. I think Brandon Johnson is a good bit better than the other guys. Jordan Humphrey fits that role, but they didn't commit much financially to him. Same with Valet. He fits that like big slot role, but I think Johnson can give you some of that. And I also think Johnson's one of the better receivers in this room. I think he deserves to make the roster.
The more I look at this, the more I think.
What are your 6? Give me your 6.
I think if I were to do 6, I agree with you. The more I look at the list, I'd keep 5. And try to sneak another person on the practice squad.
Well, yeah, I don't think you're really that scared of any of these guys getting put. I think Brandon Johnson would be the only guy, because little Jordan Humphrey, I think, was up and off the practice squad, or up and down on the practice squad last year, and no one was going for him.
Unless one just blows up in the preseason.
Yeah, if someone blows up in the preseason, that could change something. But right. I think you're probably right. What else?
What is the grade that you have? Oh, what?
Oh yeah, the grade. I'm happy to hear you have Brandon Johnson up there. I thought I was going to have to sell you on that, so I'm abandoning that question. I thought I was going to have to pull that out of you. What grade would I give it? I think D+. And I think a lot of that's just like, if you look at the receiver talent around the NFL, it's really good. Like there's a lot of good receiver. Like there's not many teams hurting for help at receiver. Or I guess maybe there's some teams hurting, but if you look, there's a lot of teams that are like good 1 through 5, and I think most teams have a better like 1, 2, 3 than the Denver Broncos. I was just listening to The Athletic did a podcast series. It was 2 episodes, 1 episode ranking the supporting casts in the AFC and another ranking the casts in the NFC. And just hearing like all these different receiving cores of different teams, I was just like, whoa, I don't know. There's a lot of teams that I think are like markedly better there. I do think there's some upside though, so that's why it's a D plus for me. I wouldn't be surprised if by season's end I think it's more of like a C, but D plus.
That sounded crazy. I do think there's some potential there, though, so that's why I'm going D plus. Is crazy sentence.
Well, if I just thought it was bad, it'd be more D. I was between D plus C minus because I do think there's a potential for it to be like a average receiving core this year. I think this team has good offensive play calling, a good offensive line, good running backs, and very questionable pass catchers, which I don't love for Bo Nix. But I think really good O-line, really good play caller will be enough to counterbalance.
So I have a hard time with it because you're right. I think in the scope of the league as a whole, you'd be sitting there saying the Broncos have like a D plus esque wide receiver room because there are so many good wide receivers in the NFL. And most teams have a better three, but with there being so many good wide receivers in the NFL, I also think that the Broncos wide receivers are part of that group that's good enough to get it done. And I don't think it ultimately hurts your team having any of these players out there. I think all of them do a fine job at their position and in what they asked to do. So that's why I'm going to put it up higher than you are. Just because, like, how can I rank this room so bad if I'm not saying that the unit's bad? I don't think any of these players are bad, so I can't do that. You know what I mean? So I'm going C.
B?
C.
Oh, C. Sorry, you cut out like right when you gave your letter, and I had to like kind of guess from the audio splice. C. I think that seems. I can't, push back against that too much. I think that's fair. And I'll also say, I guess my thing would be, you don't have a guy you're drawing something up for. I don't think, or someone that's like making many plays for you, unless Marvin Mims takes a big leap, which I think you feel more confident he will. And if he does, more of a C.
He doesn't even have to take a big leap as a route runner to be a guy you draw up plays for. Because there's no doubt about it, he's great in open field and space. He showed us making the Pro Bowl as a punt and kick returner. Like I'm definitely drawing up plays for Marvin Mims no matter what this next year.
Yeah, I guess I mean it's like in the way you would some of the true number one receivers in the league. Right now, I think you're drawing up stuff for him in like a gadgety sense, not in a man, this guy's awesome. How can we get him the ball?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we'll come back to the Marvin Mims conversation at season's end, Zach. That's what I'll have to say to you.
We'll see.
Well, before we sign out, Zach, do you have any final thoughts you want to get out to the people?
Yeah, I think we should have the next position review coming soon. Tight ends I got up this weekend. I think running backs I'll do after that, and then I'll do wide receivers. I really enjoyed that article series. It is a good deep dive into each of these position groups. I'm talking about every like single player. Didn't touch on I think who do we talk like Jalen Virgil. That's where these articles are coming through. I'm hitting on every single player on the roster, and I'm hitting a lot of different aspects of them. Like, are they going to make the roster? What will their role be on the Broncos this season? And then like what big questions, what do they still have to prove? And what would define a success for them this year? So I've really enjoyed those deep dives. I think our audience would really like them too. So check that out. The links are actually in the description below. So really easy to find.
Zach said he's hitting on every player on the roster, and he's wondering why we don't have a credential. God. Okay, guys, thanks for joining again today. This was a blast of a show. Please make sure you guys are liking the streams. That'll help us grow our channel. Zach, Bree, and I, we come live 3 times a week, 3 times a week. And then we also have Mario and Pat show. So make sure you guys are joining that. But until next time, go Broncos.
Go Broncos.